Hey everybody, what's going on? Thanks for watching this video. Today I want to go over a question that I wouldn't say I get all the time, but I get it frequently enough. And the question is, if ozone therapy is so great, why doesn't everybody use it? If ozone therapy is so good, why doesn't my doctor know about it? And I think it's a reasonable question, but I think it's a bit more complicated than just that face value question. Let me give you an example. Let's say driverless cars, right? These are cars that don't require anybody to operate them. They can drive on their own, kind of like robots. I think in the long run, driverless cars are going to be a good thing for society. I mean, think of all this time you're going to save. Cargo is going to become much cheaper to transport and all those things. But we could say the same thing. If driverless cars are so great, why isn't everybody using them? But that question isn't really looking at the full scope of things. It's not really addressing, well, what if there's some obstacles to it? What if some of the obstacles include price, distribution, manufacturing, competition, or what it's going to do to the job market? I mean, a thing that a lot of people talk about with driverless cars is the fact that it's going to displace, just in the United States alone, hundreds of thousands of truck drivers and their families. So what do you do with that? Now you have hundreds of thousands of people that are out of a job. So you can kind of see this as a bit more of a complicated issue. We know driverless cars, in my opinion, are going to be a great thing in the long run. And I've said so many times, as soon as I can get one, I'm never going to drive again because I don't know what it is, but I hate driving and it just feels like a big waste of time. But that's just me. I think a better way to phrase that question might be, okay, let's extend an olive branch as a skeptic. Let's say I don't think driverless cars are that great. But let's extend an olive branch and say, okay, let's pretend that these driverless cars are really a great thing. What are the obstacles that are preventing them from being adopted by everybody? And I think this is a better way to ask the question. Let's pretend that ozone therapy really is a good thing. What are the obstacles that are preventing it from being widely adopted by people? Well, I think the first thing to understand about ozone therapy is that it is not an industry disruptor. Let's take penicillin, for instance. Penicillin at the time had all the right things. It was really easy to take. I mean, you just needed a pill. It was really cheap to make. It was widely available. It could be distributed throughout the war very easily. It had all the right things, and it was getting rid of infections really, really well. Now, I understand there's some drawbacks to antibiotics, and a lot of you guys just really hate them all in all. And I'm not a fan of antibiotics myself because I understand what it's doing to the gut and the overall health of the body. So if I can naturally fight an infection, that's what I want to do. However, if at that time I had an infection that there just really wasn't an awareness of how else to treat it, I probably would have taken penicillin. It was, recognized as an industry disruptor because it was just doing things that nothing else at that time was doing. It was very obviously getting rid of severe infections. It was, to be blunt, it was saving lives. It was doing a really good thing. Now, ozone therapy, I know some of you are going to disagree with me on this, but I just don't believe that it's an industry disruptor in that same sense. I think it's a very good thing. I think it has a lot of benefit to a wide variety of ailments. But when you really look at it, there's only a couple things that it's handling super effectively by itself. So ozone therapy really only handles like a couple of different diseases without anything. I'm trying not to say the word cure. But let's take peripheral vascular disease, for instance, or topical skin infections. Those are two areas that ozone therapy works really, really well on. And without really many other treatments, a lot of people are seeing great results with that, and they're able to get rid of those ailments. However, a lot of people that are using ozone therapy are using it for preventative care or chronic diseases. Now, it really is a helpful thing in a lot of cases, but it's not by any means getting rid of cancer or getting rid of an autoimmune thing. There might be some good anecdotes out there that indicate that, but broadly speaking, it's not really just coming in and destroying these diseases, and I think that's fairly obvious. Otherwise, it would be an industry disruptor. So I think it's a really good thing, and it's a good tool in the tool belt to have, but it's not going to come in and just very obviously get rid of the chronic diseases that people are dealing with. So ozone therapy is not an industry disruptor. So that's one thing to consider about this question. A second thing to consider, and this question is often phrased in, if ozone therapy is so good, why doesn't my doctor know about it? So there's thousands of doctors in the United States that use ozone therapy every day, but that in Lansing, Michigan, which is not a very big town, there's over 1,000 doctors just in our city. So thousands of doctors relatively is not that much. So the vast majority of doctors do not even know about ozone therapy or what it is. And what they do know is ozone gas, the pollutant. They don't really understand the full scope of things. But this question is also insinuating, why doesn't my doctor know about it? Well, does your doctor know about every single drug in the world? There's just so many variables. Let's just say within the United States, all the different treatments, drugs, protocols, and things that your doctor could know about medicine. Let's imagine just how much that information that is. That is so much. I mean, all the different drugs. He would have to understand all the different drugs, how they interact with each other, all the different scopes of everything. And then he would have to distill that down into, hey, this is the best thing. So you really think that your doctor knows about all of medicine across the entire world over the entire course of history? Probably not. I think, everybody would say, yeah, that's a bit unrealistic. Doctors are not a deity. They're a human just like anybody else. While they might be very, very smart, until they actually go in and research ozone therapy, they're just not going to know about it. And if a lot of their peers are not researching ozone therapy, they don't really have a reason to until people like you tell them about it. Or, and the reason that we do have thousands of doctors is because they've researched about it and they're like, oh, wow, this actually might work for something. So I think, you can't really just assume that if your doctor doesn't know about it, that it's not effective, because it just isn't taking into account all the different facets of medicine. It's just impossible. But some of the obstacles, I think, for ozone therapy, there's a few of them. I think the biggest thing is that it's not a massive moneymaker. So let's take like a drug, for instance. They can reliably pour $100 million into a drug, and if it gets FDA approval, which they typically know if it will or won't, but sometimes they don't. But they typically know, like, hey, we're going to put $100 million into this. And it's hard to explain how much money that is. I think we hear that number and we understand, yeah, $100 million. But that is a ridiculous amount of cash to put into something. Cash, that is crazy. So let's say they did put that into it. They can reliably make a big return on that in in terms of billions of dollars. So ozone therapy is, few $1 million between a number of companies. It's really relatively just not much money in it. So you're not going to get people who are big players in the industry that are like, hey, we could make $1 billion off this, or even 500 million. There's just not that kind of space for it. And the reason is because ozone is so easy to make. All you need is a few cents of oxygen and an ozone generator, and you're good to go. That's part of the thing with it, and part of the beauty of it is that once you have the equipment, you're good to go. You don't really need to spend more money. Whereas a pill you have to take, and for a lot of those drugs, you have to take continually throughout the course of your lifetime. So if you're in your 20s and you start on a couple of prescriptions, they can calculate they call it customer lifetime value, and that's what a marketing term for it, but customer lifetime value based on, okay, so they're 26, they take this until they die, average lifetime is 72. How much money is that over the course of a lifetime? So ozone therapy just isn't doing that type of thing. Plus, it's not, in a lot of cases, not something that needs the continual thing over the course of a lifetime. I think it's good to do as a preventative care, but if you're talking about necessities, like do you have to do this? Is it really going to make a massive difference? I don't think you have to do ozone therapy. I think it'll be better. But once you get past your hurdle or your chronic disease, or you get onto the path of healing, it's not like a necessity for you to continue normal life. It's just a little benefit, let's say. Another obstacle for ozone therapy, I think, is the framework in which medicine works. And that being like basically the framework set forward by the FDA and the drug company. So just because something is outside of the box of the FDA doesn't mean it doesn't work. I think that's just a dumb thing. Anytime you make a rigid box that says these are the rules, this is how it's done, it's not that that's a bad thing. That probably, and I know a lot of you don't like it when I say this kind of thing, but what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to have it make sense to as many people as possible. So making a rigid outline of rules like the FDA does is not inherently a bad thing at all. Actually, it's probably a good thing, because it means you're going to get a higher quality of candidates. You're going to be more likely to qualify better things. But if something doesn't fit into that box, and in this case it's money, because yes, it only is $50,000 to register for FDA approval, but all the studies that you need to fund actually ends up being easily $20 to $100 million, depending on what you're trying to do. So you're talking about huge amounts of cash. But because of that threshold and how the box is set up, there are, by the nature of it, just going to be things that actually do work, that are actually good, that are marginalized, meaning that they're not going to fit into that system, that way of doing things. But that doesn't mean that they don't work. I mean, it's just saying that this doesn't fit into this particular system. So I don't know. I just think that's a really big obstacle for ozone therapy that is going to take some time to break through. Oh, the other thing with it too is that you can't patent an ozone generator. So let's say that I did get through FDA approval. I spent $50 million, again, huge amount of money, more than I've ever seen by far, but huge amount of money. Let's say we put 50 million bucks into it and got it FDA approved. I can't patent the thing that I just got approved. So I could have spent all that money, and then a big company like Johnson & Johnson or whoever can come out, make the exact same thing and say, hey, thanks for getting FDA approval. Now we get to capitalize on this, and we're going to put you out of business. So you did all the work getting this approved. We have all the distribution network, we can manufacture this, we can do it better than you essentially, and we're going to do that. You can't protect your product. So as soon as you bring it into the market, you're going to be competing with everybody, which is another reason it's just very unlikely to get FDA approval. Now I have some ideas tinkering in the back of my head, but I think it'll come in a way that people kind of don't expect it. So anyway, I know this is a little bit of a ramble, and I appreciate you listening to me, but I think this question is a valid question in some senses, but we're not understanding the layers to it and the depth of it. And I didn't even get into much of it in this video. I just wanted to elucidate that, yeah, there's probably some more factors to consider and to understand kind of how things work in terms of like the FDA and, the fact that there is a very rigid box, and maybe accepting that not everything is going to fit inside that box that works. This box doesn't say that this is all of medicine. It just says, hey, this is the best thing we have right now. And again, I'm trying to be gentle with people, and I understand that a lot of people don't like the FDA, but there is some good things to it. So I don't think we can just neglect that. And before I forget, I want to mention that we just launched a new podcast. It's called A Cure for Nothing. So you might be wondering, why did you call it A Cure for Nothing? Well, all the things that we're going to talk about are going to be based in more natural medicine for the most part, more natural medicine, more alternative medicine, kind of up that alley. And as you know, none of those are recognized by the FDA to cure anything. So we're just going to talk about cures for nothing. So it's kind of a statement of irony. I thought it was kind of catchy. It was actually an idea of Christian who works here, but it's a new podcast. And essentially what we're going to do is we're going to be interviewing people, going to doctors and trying to get a good understanding of how they're helping people and really trying to dig into what they're doing to get the results that they're doing. So over the first few episodes, it'll probably be a little bit choppy because we're trying to figure out this new format. I don't have a ton of doctors lined up yet, but I promise you I'm going to put a lot of work into this over time. So if you would like to check out the new podcast, A Cure for Nothing, click the link below in the description. You can check out the first episode that's just been released. Anyway, that's the end of the video. We'll see you next time.